Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. I'm excited tonight to share with you. I saw on night two the new Quiet Place movie, Day One. Very excited from this movie from when I heard it was coming out because I love the premise of it. Right, I think when this movie was getting ready to come out, I thought back to when they made Cloverfield, and there was a huge rumor that they were going to go back and give us kind of this big behind-the-scenes version of Cloverfield at a much larger scope and scale. And this is kind of how I envisioned what this movie would be. That it would be this big, large production of what we would see on day one in a large city. Obviously, New York, biggest city in the country. What would happen in that area? And it starts out pretty interestingly. Obviously, we have Lupita Nyong'o's character, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. But she's kind of going through something in her life, going into the city, and then kind of all hell breaks loose. You see the aliens start to land in the city. And this is where, for me, I struggle with the movie a little bit, because I actually think the movie as a story and like a character play is very, very good. I think she's amazing in the story. I think the limited amount of actors that we interact with in the movie do an excellent job. I think there's real tension in the movie. I think there's some good scares. But I think the movie falls flat a little bit on being epic in scope and size. And I'll give you an example of how I thought about this movie. When I was watching it, a couple of movies came into my head. The one that really pops into my head was War of the Worlds, the Tom Cruise movie from the early 2000s. Very much a similar vibe to me. You're right outside the city. You have this alien attack. You get this one really big epic scope, and then we're tied into the family. And then later on in the movie, you have that train scene where they're all trying to get on the ferry and the train goes through. This movie felt very, very similar to me, where you had this first attack, which I thought was really truncated. It was pretty exciting at first, but then you had this kind of explosion, and you had all this dust and debris, and everything got really hard to see. So I felt like we were cheated a little bit on that first attack. And then later on, obviously we know from the second movie that the aliens can't swim. So they've discovered that if we get the folks on the boat, on the ferry, they've destroyed the bridges, that they can actually go in and get the folks evacuated. So we have this kind of helicopters flying above, really driving the aliens crazy. And we see this large group of people go out in the streets and making a bunch of noise, right? And so you knew there was going to be an attack. That's probably the coolest scene in the movie because you get this vibe of the aliens. And I'm not giving anything away that really wasn't in the trailer. The aliens move around. To me, it looks like a bunch of spiders, especially when you see them in the long shots on the buildings in the city. Very cool. They move very, very fast. The aliens in this movie, you see a lot more of them. And when you see them in mass, they are pretty terrifying. So that's a very cool part of this movie, that the aliens are very scary. But I felt like the movie devolved into like a two-person play or act most of the time versus being this grandiose scope, which is what I kind of wanted to see. It's funny, as I think about these movies, there's not a lot of movies that have done a really good job of creating that large scope and staying with it the whole movie. The best one that comes to mind for me is probably Aliens, because if you think about this, is again, to me, the monsters in A Quiet Place are very much a xenomorph vibe. And you think about Alien was this isolated, 7 characters, getting tore through on this kind of haunted house in space. And then Aliens was a much bigger scope, and you had a much larger group of people. They would get whittled down. And I was kind of hoping for that in this movie. Like, I was hoping we'd have a larger cast, and the cast would get whittled down. You had a little bit of that, but it really fell into, like, there was, the main character and her friend. Something happens to him, another character comes into her life, and that person now becomes the other most important person of her life, and there's really the two of them that are together for the most part. That being said, it's very well done with what we have. Like, I think, like I said, I think the main character is great. I think our secondary character is excellent. We have a throwback to a character from the second movie, which was pretty cool, right? For someone that was on the island. He was by Henry in this movie, but he was kind of the boat guy in the second movie. And that's, Damon Hensue. Again, hopefully I pronounced that correctly. But, again, I think there's not enough of that. Like, I think there's a lot of scenes in the movie that convey this smallness of New York City, which is what I was disappointed with. Like, I think it felt small. I think, and it was funny, as I was walking home thinking about this, the attack at the very beginning of A Quiet Place 2 felt way bigger in scope, in scale, than the attack in New York City felt in this movie. And that's where I think my disappointment comes in. I think it's a good movie. I think there's really good, genuine scares. I think there's some good jump scares. I think the acting is fine. I think we have a really good character study of our main heroine in the movie. I think it's well done. I just think it's the wrong movie for this. If you're going to give me Day One in New York City, like, I want it to be big and epic in scope, and I want it to be a big sci-fi movie, not kind of the same horror movie I've gotten in the last 2 movies, just in a different location that I don't think it take full advantage of. So that being said, I think I'm going to give this movie a 5 out of 10. Only for that reason. I think it was very good. I think it was well done. If it was A Quiet Place 3 and it took place in another small town, I'd probably give it an 8. Or maybe a 7, but I have to give it a 5 because I feel like it was a lost opportunity, and I think it was marketed in a way that we expected it to be a lot bigger in scope and scale. So that's it for that. Super excited. A lot of cool stuff coming out. Lots of horror movies coming up. We have Maxine next week. I loved X, and I think Pearl is one of the best acting performances I've ever seen from an actress. So I'm super excited to see what Mia Goth does in the next scope in the movie in the 80s with Maxine. So I can't wait to see that one. Lots of stuff coming up soon. Lots of horror movies still coming for the rest of the year. We got Smile 2. We've got the new M. Night Shyamalan movie Trap coming out. We're only a couple of months away from Halloween Horror Nights and Hallowscream and diving into all that. So super excited to share that with you. I appreciate you checking out the channel. You'll probably notice today that I'm not sitting in front of my horror stuff. A lot of crazy stuff happening in life, but that we're redoing that area over there. I got to kind of unpack some stuff, and so that'll be up again soon. Hopefully it'll be a little less congested. You'll be able to see a little of the stuff we have a little bit more clearly. So if you haven't done it so far, please hit that like and subscribe. And as always, stay scary.